Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this very special Good Friday Facebook Live. I hope that wherever you woke up this morning, you were filled with hope and love and goodness that this time of year can often bring. I must admit that for me, waking up this morning, it felt just somewhat different to the normal Good Fridays. Maybe it's because of the that kind of like surface level meaning that we kind of attach to Easter, which is, it's a little bit of a break from work. Maybe it's a break from our toils. And often in our kind of reductionist, materialistic society, these times of ritual have been maybe stripped or made or void of meaning in the absence of the deep connections to our human mythologies. And one of my favorite thinkers is a guy called Carl Jung. He's a psychologist, and he recognized the importance of finding meanings in myths. And he said in that they express core ideas that are part of the human species as a whole. So this morning, whether you kind of identify with the Christian story of death and resurrection, or connect deeply with the stories of death and new life that is around us everywhere, every day, this time I feel like invites us to connect deeply to one of the most incredible universal processes of the awakening of the soul, and that is the process of letting go of the former and trusting that new life will emerge. I just want to read you something that I wrote a couple of years ago of Good Friday. And I think it's particularly interesting that we find ourselves kind of like on the macro in this unprecedented time in and around this season of Easter. I wrote this, I said, a day to die, to celebrate death, to bring to an end all those threads of conversation in your mind that's been keeping you awake, all the anxieties that's been consuming your energy, to bring it to a state of nothingness, death, dead, buried, knowing it is done, it is finished, the past is complete, nothing lacking, nothing wanting. It's a time to bring all those unresolved problems, the open threads running through our mind like a web browser with 7 tabs open, into the void of nothingness, buried deep under the fertile soil of possibility, like a caterpillar going into a cocoon, not trying to solve the problems as its former self, but simply trusting that in the death of all these things, there will be a metamorphosis that will transform it into something which the caterpillar mind could never even begin to conceive. So this morning, in a world that's kind of heralded step-by-step self-improvement as kind of the gold standard, we've kind of forgotten what the eons of nature has shouted to us from the womb, and that is that self-improvement sometimes really is just an illusion. It's powerless compared to the power of transformation that can come through death and resurrection. So this morning, whatever unfinished stories are in your head, the threads that are keeping you up at night, just lay them down into the lavish soil of the burial grounds, and open your heart to surrender, trust the process that generations before us have trusted and told stories about around the campfires. And that is the trust that the butterfly will come out of the cocoon and emerge for whoever you are. So it's so good to have you guys this morning. We've got a really awesome broadcast ahead, and I'm going to invite Anthony, who is waiting for us live from his apartment in Sydney, CBD. Anthony, it is absolute honor to have you on. How are you?
I'm really well, Rick, and I'm really honoured to be part of this live stream with your colleagues. And if I can, before we get started, there's a particular practice here in Australia which is about acknowledging the land we're on. The Indigenous land that we gather. And so I do want to pay respect that even though I'm in Sydney, which is a colonial term for this land, I'm actually on Gadigal land of the Eora Nation, the land of the Indigenous people. So I don't know the name of the lands of where you're at, and what we have hundreds of countries in Australia, thousands of them, but I'm on a beautiful one called Gadigal land. So it's really important that I acknowledge where I'm coming from.
Thank you. That's beautiful, and I'm excited to delve into a little bit of your work that you're doing. But before we start, I think some of our listeners, only some, may have, this is probably the first time they're tuning in to hear some of your incredible thoughts and ideas. And I'd love for you just to start by telling us, like, how did you get to where you are? Like, how
Yeah.
did you come to be so passionate about the world of early childhood?
Yeah, I began my career in the early years space, what was known then as an untrained assistant. You know, I was
Right.
looking for work, as many people do. Education, it was either going to be education, was one of my passions. I did very well at science. I don't know how I did very well at science at school, I have to say. But education was kind of this calling. So I truly had this unwavering belief that it's most powerful to work with the youngest. I don't know where this has come from, but when I myself was so young, so I began as an untrained assistant in a long daycare program, and it wasn't too long after I started that I realized I had no idea what I was doing, and my leader at that time suggested I go to university, and I learned the art and the science of teaching, which I did. So I began my early childhood degree while I continued to work in the early years space. And it just led to really amazing things. I mean, I've been really honoured to be mentored by amazing, primarily women in our sector, who perhaps, and this is a lesson in life, believed in me more than I believed in myself. And you know, gave me pillars to stand up on and opportunities to engage. And yeah, it led to a range of roles, from being a teacher in a long day program to being a centre director. I worked in government, managing an early childhood department. And then was really honoured to have a role of a manager in an Aboriginal early childhood program in inner Sydney, in Redfern, which was just the most rewarding role I think I've ever had, because I learnt about the complexity and the tribulations of whiteness in this country. And yeah, we've been Semann and Slattery, where I've been working now for 20 years, has offered me the great opportunity to engage in research and professional development with people. It's my way of staying connected with a sector that constantly feels like we're fighting for what is right, but we continue to do what we know is right despite those challenges. And that's where I, as a famous philosopher, Eulalia Bosch, said, it's a short story with a very long ending. So yeah, that's where I'm at now.
So you're right now, I know you got your company is your organization is providing webinars and guidance for our colleagues in Australia, being a shining guiding light in these times. What do you think the lived experience is for the teacher right now in Australia and New Zealand?
You know, it's really quite interesting when we find ourselves in a moment of struggle. I think we have various paths that we can choose to navigate. One is an unwavering belief that what I do is so critical to my belief system, and despite what's happening around me, the complexity or the tensions, I'm going to stay true to what I believe in, which is what I've noticed out there. You know, we've got quite a range of emotions happening in our sector at the moment. I think complexity brings rawness to the surface, from people feeling that where they're not being heard, to others feeling like they're less important than others in our sector. I think the other path we can take is to dissolve and collapse, and that's perfectly acceptable right now. I'm not sure it's sustainable. But I mean, right now, I think there's a lot of bravery happening amongst teachers. Our early childhood programs in Australia are essential services.
Right. Okay.
I don't even, yeah. I call them early childhood programs. They're essential, but they're essential, so they're open. So despite the narrative of people being at risk by being in contact, our teachers and our educators are showing up every day, trying to be brave, trying to figure out what social distancing looks like with an infant.
Right.
You know, what it looks like when there's mixed messages and protective wear is not available to early childhood people in what is now called an essential service, but to others. But we show up, you know, we show up and we show up brave, and we're finding humor in some of these things. Some of the Facebook posts of staff dancing just reminds me that despite some of the challenges in life, there has to be something that keeps the heartbeat going. And, you know, one of the lovely things about despair and challenges or turmoil is it brings people together. It perhaps can bring what can be seen as the other into our space. We invite people in because, you know, I truly believe there's the gift of collective mourning is always more powerful than individual mourning or individual pain, because you begin to understand that centre down the road who may have been seen or labelled as a competitor right now is not your competitor. They're your colleague who's going through the same fears or the same emotions of you. And I don't know about what's happening for others, but simple things when people say, how are you going right now? There's I can feel them saying, how are you? Where before it just felt like this, how are you going? And we move on. So yeah, that's what's happening.
Beautiful. So that is a significant, so all our childcare centres and early childhood education centres are closed right now. So just our heart and our compassion goes out, and just the absolute bravery, like you said, of those who are still turning up, finding ways. And like you said, often it is in the absence of like a common purpose, we find each other to kind of like compete against. But because crisis brings us together, it shows our humanity to each other. We're able to relate and kind of drop those barriers of competition and survival instincts against each other, and come together in unity and say, hey, yeah, me too. I feel what you're feeling.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Like, I think we've been a sector that has, for probably from when we even began, you know, truly have brought a majority of people who share an unwavering belief around the rights of young children. And I think our wanting to show up every day and do our best, self-sacrificing our own health and well-being, is because of the children that we work with. It's because of that belief that, you know, they have a right to be here. And even if it's not under the best circumstances, we will make the best of adversity. So, I mean, I absolutely salute those educators who are rocking up every day. It's admirable, to say the least, without being patronising. It's absolutely admirable.
Right. You mentioned being brave. I think I'm not sure if you completed your PhD or you're busy with it on courage and leadership, and right now that it can't be more relevant than right in this moment. So how do you have courage during these turbulent times? What does that look like? What does that mean?
It's an interesting one, Rick. It's like most things in life, words are really slippery. They're hard to kind of grapple with. And whilst we might think we're hearing the same things, we'll be hearing different things. You know, courage for me could be that person who just puts on a brave face and just rocks up every day to work. You know, it's not what we would define as the hero, the narrative of the hero. You know, it's just that's a definition that sets us all up to fail. You know, courage could be, for some people right now, allowing themselves to turn to the person next to them and just say, look, I'm not okay. You know, I'm struggling with being present. I'm struggling with being available. To me, that's that notion. It's what they call personal courage, which is it's never a compare and contrast, but it's stepping into a space that you yourself have had to brave, makes you a courageous actor. And within the script of courage, it's never about comparing the actors, because, you know, was it Lotta Smallaguzzi who said we all come with pieces attached to us? And, you know, people are rocking up or, you know, engaging in this world in really interesting ways every day. And the thing we realize is we never really know the person we're looking at, because they don't know themselves. You know, there's that really fabulous quote in the kind of contemporary leadership space that says, allow me to introduce myself to you. You know, there's always the tension. There's always tension in a story. That's what makes it actually a story. And so when you look at your colleague, you don't really know who you're looking at, because there's so much going on for that person that what might seem to us as an everyday experience could be someone who's really brave in financial adversity, but is choosing to rock up and be there for children. So there's this great quote by this woman called Marianne Rydalmere, and she says, courage doesn't always roar. Courage is that quiet voice that says to you at the end of the day, I can give it a go tomorrow. Just kind of just give it another go. You know, it's that stuff. Yeah.
Idea of everyone's doing the best they can with what they've got. And so to foster a culture of courage in teams, it seems that we have to really engage deeply with empathy with each other, and a culture of understanding that that, like you said, we all come with our own attachments and we're all showing up the best way that we can.
Totally. And do you know, what's really intriguing, and I'm sure you've probably touched on this in previous broadcasts, is that we're part of history. I mean, we're part of what's going to be spoken about in 100 years, you know?
Right.
And I hope what comes to the surface are not just conversations around economic turmoil and financial hardship for people, but I hope early childhood people are part of that story, you know, particularly in this country where, you know, it's what keeps our country going, you know. And I want the stories of humanity to shine, and not just the stories of adversity, because that's not the real picture. You know, the bravery, the courage is really part of what the narrative should be in the future.
I think that's why I really, like I mentioned before, I deeply engage with mythologies and stories, because it puts the authorship back in our hands. Like, we get to tell the story. We get to choose what the story is that we want to tell through this times. And it helps us connect to something that is larger than ourselves, you know. And I love what you're saying. Like, let's fast forward to 10, 20, 30, 40 years and ask ourselves, what are the stories that we want to be told about this time?
Yeah.
And let's do that.
Yeah. And it's an interesting time, I think, in our sector, because it could be a time of real healing for people where there may have been some fractured relationships in the workplace.
Right.
Where it's an opportunity to learn to let go and let come. You know, that I love the work of Friedrich Nietzsche
Mm-hmm.
and his concept of active forgetfulness, where he has argued that sometimes to move forward in life, we have to learn to forget those things that have held us back. And maybe this is a moment where prior tensions or hiccups in relationships in the workplace, because they exist. I mean, to suggest that life is always fabulous in an early childhood school is to be foolish. But maybe this is a time where healing can be a part of this, and we can take up Nietzsche's idea of maybe learn to forget that stuff that's held you and your colleague back, and use your own suffering as a way of connecting with your colleague's suffering. Use your own pain right now to connect with the pain of the person that you've perhaps disconnected with. And in most cases, something that we've forgotten why we can't connect with the colleague.
The emotion is, yeah, the emotion is still so prevalent, but we've forgotten the reason. Like we've built a fortress around what it felt like, and then we kind of like, what I know it's real, but why was it? And we try and rationalize it.
Yeah.
I think that's why I mean, what you're saying about letting go, I remember the scene in the movie Life of Pi, and towards the end, I forget the name of the tiger, but it's walking away, and the comment is, maybe the game of life is just simply a series of letting goes, and I think that's why some of us, a lot of the time, can struggle with the sequential things of life, because it really is presenting us opportunities to attach and then to let go, to attach and to let go. And it's almost like our deep need to keep the attachment to that feeling or that emotion or that the colleagues wound that they caused us, that really causes us to end up in a lot of suffering.
It's interesting. I mean, we can do a simple task of going back into our Facebook and see how many people we've blocked, and see if you can remember why you blocked them.
Right.
Why did you?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying unblock these people, but remind yourself, what can you think about what happened that led to blocking this person? And that's a challenge, to say the least.
100%.
Yeah.
So it's a moment for us to pause in our sector. It's a moment for us to think of possibly some of those relationships in our teams that are fractured. Difficult for a lot of people to move past that and to show up. But you said something really beautiful in the beginning. You said there were women who believed in you probably more than what you believed in yourself.
Yeah.
I think we can all relate to that person at a certain time, possibly, that just helped us, catapulted us into the fullness of our potential. And to be able to see your colleagues in that sense, to believe in them and to believe in the gold that's within them, will often bring so much emotion of healing to the fractures. How would you go about starting that process?
It's an interesting one. I mean, I'll tell you this story. I was teaching in a long day program. I was teaching the 3 to 4 year olds, and a woman who I didn't know very well, who was a manager in government, contacted me to sit on a panel, an interview panel. She was about to employ, and this would have been over 20 years ago, so it may not seem innovative now, but it was then, an artist to work with children full-time in an early childhood program. And I remember being really honored to be invited to sit on this panel. I'd never sat on a panel before, an interview panel. And I rocked up quite nervous, perhaps even more nervous than the person being interviewed.
Right.
Before we got started, I remember saying to her, why am I here? Why did you invite me to be part of this panel? Because one of the things that I try to do in life is, if I have a question, I'll ask it. I'll just ask it.
Yeah.
I'm not ashamed by trying to seek the truth rather than make up my own narrative around why something has happened. And she said to me, I'm not going to be around forever. And we have to pave the way for the next generation. And I can think of, and she's now passed away, and she was an amazing advocate for diversity and difference and children who were refugees. And I always think about the gift that she offered me, not by being on that panel. I mean, that was the experience, but by experiencing someone who believes in you and offers you an opportunity to shine. And I can think of quite a number of those experiences that have been gifted to me. And so I feel like there is a responsibility for us to give back to that next generation, because we're never going to be around forever. That's the reality, you know. But you want a legacy to be there. You know, it's what they call in leadership your wake. It's the stuff that you leave behind you. You know, we talk about the wake from a boat, you know, the whitewash behind it.
Yeah.
Humans leave a wake as well, because there's that idea that everything you say, everything you do, everything you touch has your DNA on it. And that's your wake. And the only person who gets to have an impact on the story told about you in your absence is you, based on how you behave every day. And so what these women have gifted me is this absolute belief that we don't believe in ourselves as much as we should, and therefore our one of our gifts is to give others the opportunity to shine, particularly people who share a belief like you. You know, my worldview is one of social justice and equity. It's one of healing and reconciliation. And so when I see people who perhaps share that belief, you try to bring your tribe around you and support them, because that's been my experience of people doing that for me. So it's a very simple thing we can do, is to honor other people around us.
You know, if we were to just reduce down, or not reduce, strip down our why as early childhood educators simply to belief in the children more than what they believe in themselves. Well, not more, but you know what I mean. That would be the most powerful movement in history, that we would have a generation who truly believe that they are capable and possible of more than what they thought.
Yeah. I also wonder if the first step in that journey is self-belief. You know, I think it's hard to gift something to someone you don't believe in yourself, if you don't believe yourself.
Right.
So if we as a sector, and I don't want this to be controversial, but it may.
We like sometimes to go on the fringes. It's weird. It's good sound bites.
Your views might drop in a moment. But perhaps if we stop needing others to believe in us, stop needing others to give us self-worth, perhaps even stop the narrative that families don't value us, and let go of that, and actually just say, I have to believe in me, and anything else on top of that is icing on the cake, you know? I think this notion that my self-worth is tied up with other people believing in me puts life on this edge, really. And I'm not saying that we don't want people to believe in us, but that's been a long-term struggle for our sector. And I don't see that shifting anytime soon. And so maybe the first thing we can gift ourselves is letting go of having others needing to believe in us for us to believe in ourselves, and just saying, I need to connect with what my belief is, why I'm here. And maybe that's the first starting point. I don't know.
It's, you know, I suppose the way that our psyche gets formed in childhood is kind of through the role modeling and those strong attached relationships that we have, the nurturing and the believing of those around us in us. But if those needs aren't met, in early childhood, I think then it does definitely become a deficit in our lives, where we're continually still searching for the one who's going to believe in us, still searching for the one who's going to tell us that we're okay. And that's okay. Like that is completely normal for so many of our lived experiences. But to discover that the innate potential and possibility that lives within you is so powerful, and that you have everything that you need right now in this space, I think really leads to you blossoming as the butterfly. And I completely agree with you. It moves us from somewhat of a victim mentality where we feel the world is happening to us, to understanding that the world is really happening for us in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe there's that Margaret Wheatley saying, the leaders we need are here. They're here. I mean, and so in thinking about that, then we have to stop searching for the other. You know, the leaders we need in our sector are just beside us right now. It's the quiet one who can navigate turmoil in a really peaceful way. It's the colleague who stays absolutely present with a child when that child is having a meltdown. I mean, that's the leader that we need. But it is hard to believe in yourself, you know. The enemy is within the ranks. It's not outside of our ranks. You know, I often say to people, I have no doubt that we would never accept someone, well, I hope we would never accept someone speaking to us the way we speak to ourselves.
Totally.
This is a hard truth. You know, we can wake up in the morning and look in the mirror and begin to make derogatory comments about our weight, the way we look, our skin, our hair, like it's not great, whatever it is.
Totally.
We can rock up, and this is my kind of example. We can rock up to professional development, and someone wacky like me would say, "What do you think?" to a group of people, and we can sit there and say, I better not say anything because I might be wrong. I might sound stupid. Now, I wonder how we would respond if we were at that professional development course and you did put your hand up and the person next to you says, "Oi, ugly, put your hand down. You're stupid and you're going to make a fool of yourself." We probably would block that person on Facebook. So I often say, what gives us the right to speak to ourselves like that? What does that do to the cells in your body, to your beingness, when that's the narrative that we're saying to ourselves? Self-belief is not always about jumping up and say, "I'm fabulous." It's about don't put yourself down. Don't talk to yourself in a way that reduces your essence of who you are. And the interesting thing is, when someone says to us, "Tell me the narrative that you use, that you talk to yourself," we're too embarrassed to tell them how we talk to ourselves. So that gives us a hint that the enemy is within the ranks. And so we need to change that. And I'm not saying, I want to make a distinction between that and self-doubt. Self-doubt sometimes is useful to kind of give us that little edge in life. But I just say to people, just be kind to yourself. It's a real gift if you can talk to yourself and treat your body like you're treating someone you love. It's yeah.
I love what you're saying. A great litmus test that I've heard is like, would you speak to your best friend? Would you say that to your best friend? Right.
Yeah.
Oh, like you said, nope, I wouldn't. And in that moment, recognizing that often the voices of our closest, maybe our mother and our father and those around us, does become programmed to become the inner critic, the judge that lives inside of us. So having kindness to ourselves, to understand that these are learned voices, learned sentences that has been programmed into our minds, and the judge and the critic within us, even though initially and originally it was designed to keep us safe from hurt and protect us within the boundaries of what was believed to be right or wrong for us at an early age, now is kind of like the old guy or the old girl that kind of has overstayed its welcome a little bit, because we've evolved to become very strong and independent humans,
Yeah.
and to understand that this voice inside that judge is not necessarily your authentic voice. It's just a massive first step for us to realize, like, oh, okay, I can create a little bit of distance between that voice and who I truly am, and have some empathy. Like, hey, thank you again. I've said this before. Thank you for trying to protect me. I know you're thinking you're trying to protect me from the shame of my peers, maybe in that example of your professional development. But I am safe now. I am safe. And I don't, I just don't need you anymore.
Yeah, and none of us are free from it, Rick. I mean,
No way.
even when I got online, I'm thinking, oh, do I look tired? Like, and then I just thought, bugger it. I am tired. I'm emotionally tired. And that's actually okay, because others might look at me and say, I'm tired too,
Mm-hmm.
Fragility is being fragile in life is a good thing. But putting yourself down is never a good thing, And what tends to happen, I think, is when we do that to ourselves, then it becomes so normal for others to do it to us. I remember the work of, I don't know if you've read the work of Professor Louise Hard. She
No,
was
I
a
haven't.
professor in early childhood. She did her PhD on horizontal violence in early childhood. And it was, I'm not going to do justice to her work. In fact, you can download her PhD online, Louise
Okay.
Hard, horizontal violence. And she talked about, the crab and the crab bucket, that you never need to put a lid on a crab bucket, because as soon as one crab goes out, the other one just drags it down. But they're always going to stay down. They're always just pulling each other down. And sadly, she saw that within the early years space. And I remember reading that work and I thought, for a sector that needs each other more than ever right now, maybe out of this adversity comes a whole heap of healing for us, but also for our colleagues. But I think if we can't exercise self-love as a generous act each day, then my way of being with you will just reflect the way I talk to myself. And then what tends to happen is we accept others talking to us in that way because we allow it for ourselves. And I just, I see myself as under construction as a human being,
Mm-hmm.
I'm always kind of working through this very limited time in this body on this planet. Because if I had it my way, I don't want it to end. I quite love the people I'm with and my life and this sector. I don't want the story to end, but I know it will eventually, and that's okay. But in saying that, we need to be really careful here that I'm not projecting a way of being that is anything other than self-respect. Because if I project a lack of self-respect towards myself in the way I interact with you, Rick, like if I'm rude to you, but it's lack of self-respect for myself, because how am I positioning myself?
Mm-hmm.
And so if we see ourselves under construction, that each day we're kind of developing and we're growing, I will learn from that fragility. I will learn from that moment of perhaps a lack of who I want to be. There's that beautiful saying, if you know who you want to be, then what to do will fall into place in life. And so we always have to remind ourselves, who do I want to be? How do I want to be seen? How do I want to be heard? How do I want that story to be told? Because then I need to match my behavior with it. But if I'm not clear about who I want to be, then it's hard. It's really hard to behave in a way that aligns to my goals.
For sure. I think the crab example is really interesting. And you don't shy away from talking about love and the power of love for human relationships and for the world. So talk to me a little bit about a place where that analogy does not apply for, a place perhaps where we're lifting each other up and what that looks like.
Where love doesn't apply, or love does apply?
Where love does apply.
Oh, I think love applies everywhere. I mean, some of that work that I've been doing, and I've done some talks in New Zealand around the power of love, and published a couple of things about it. Maybe that was my ego just talking then by saying that. But anyway, we'll move on.
Oh, no, I felt, thank you. I was able to anchor myself. Well,
I talk about, and this is I think we've had a very narrow definition of love in this world that is associated with silk sheets, candles, and our homes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's lovely if you can have that. God knows how you wash silk sheets these days, but anyway. I've argued that you need to love the people you work with, not just love leading them. And to me, love is the oxygen that keeps us tethered to each other. And I've called for a redefinition of love that pulls away from some of those really restrictive definitions that we've become accustomed to, that perhaps we see as personal or physical intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's intriguing because I could say, I would honestly say I love everybody that I work with at Semann Slattery. I have a deep connection with them. I value them as humans. I care for them in the way that I care for the people that I call my family, because it's a way of saying, I know you, I can see you, Rick, I can feel what you're going through. If I'm not tethered to you in that way, then how on earth will I ever get to see you and understand you and then respond to you in a way that you need me to respond to? The people in our sector are not just there to produce outcomes for children. They're not. Mm-hmm. They are there as people. They are not there to keep the economy going. They are there as people. They're not there just to teach children. They are there as people. And when I see you as a human, as the flesh, the heart, whatever the pain, I learn to then love you as a person. And that then means I will connect with you in the way that I need to connect, which is a balance of my heart and my head, not just my head. And too often we just lead through the head. And I think what we need to do is we need to lead through the heart. But be warned, sometimes the heart can be as irrational as the head, because the head is irrational. And sometimes the heart can be as irrational, because what you can do is sacrifice yourself for others. And then you end up despising the choices you make. But to me, a love of the people you work with means I really see you as a person, and I'm there for you, even when you want to push me away, even when I'm saying to myself, lean out of this. My heart is saying, lean back into this, because this is a feeling, thinking, smelling, existing human being in front of you who will leave your place and go back to home and be loved by others. And I should afford you the same level of love and care as I would my friend. Yeah.
There's a saying that says that the light I see in you is the fire that burns within me.
Yeah.
And our truest nature in the core of who we are, I believe, is love. And so when I connect with that core humanness of love in you, then I do truly deeply connect with myself, and I see you and me, and me and you, and there's this incredible deep bond, like you said, through all trauma, through all kind of surface level behavior that remains, because I'm connecting to you at your deepest level.
Yeah.
Very difficult to do if you're unable to connect to yourself on that level as well. So again, the notion of self-love and connecting with that is, I think, really important in everything that we do in this work.
And when people say, they ask me questions like, what is good leadership? I say, I don't know, but I can tell you what bad leadership is.
Right.
What does love look like? It's hard, but I can tell you when there's no love in a workplace.
Mm.
So when you find yourself falling out of connection into disconnection with someone, hold yourself accountable to that. Don't let yourself spiral down, because in our sector we talk a lot about, more broadly in the world, we need to be effective communicators, but we stop talking when we need to talk. We start to push back, and the stubbornness in me pushes in what your mind is saying, push back, because I don't want there to be a new normal of us not connecting, of us not being connected in a way that allows me to heal what is breaking. And I often say to people, you find yourself at a crisis point with someone and you can choose two paths, the weird or the not weird path. Like the weird path is disconnecting with them, walking out of the staff room when they walk in, not making eye contact. That just becomes weird. Or you can speak truth and turn to that person and say, this might sound strange, but what we have is too important for it to fall apart. I left the workplace yesterday not feeling as connected to you as I did when I walked in. Are we okay?
Mm.
That's what the world needs. That's what we need right now.
That is incredibly insightful, that when we need to communicate, we often don't, right? When we're connected by love and we feel that disconnection, that should be an anchor and a symbol in our head that, oh, now's the time. I can't let this slip. I need to go on the not weird pathway and find language. And just that simple statement, which you said, hey, yesterday when we left, I felt disconnected from you. And Philip, I hope, talked about connecting to your own human needs as like the foundation of good communication. And so I have a need for connection with you. And are we able to talk about that? And if we all practice that in the moment, I think that we will find our teams growing deeply connected to each other and forming strong, lasting bonds.
Yeah. And it's hard. People don't want to talk about the tough stuff. But my love of you means I don't want you to leave the workplace feeling anything other than good about yourself. So therefore, I'm going to talk about what's happened between us. And, usually it's the minor stuff. It's the most ridiculous things that become this lasting pain in a relationship. And I don't know, I've been there. I've been in that place where I've felt awkward rocking up to work when I worked with children because something went down between me and someone. And I wish I had the wisdom then that I hope I have now, which was, I'm an equal player in this. Not just them. It's so easy to blame the other. But what I should have done was spoken up in a way that wasn't accusing, that wasn't creating emotional pain for that person, but just simply to say, are we okay? And if they say yes, then we accept that. And if they say no, and they raise something about the way we behaved, we own the fact that we caused pain for that person. It doesn't become an argument about who's right and who's wrong, because my love of you means you're speaking your truth, and that's what we need. But sadly, what we see is, and this is a very general sweeping statement, and it is a sweeping statement, sometimes the leaders in our place don't behave like that, therefore they don't set the emotional tone for that in the workplace. And I think this is where each and every one of us can call to action a new emotional tone in the workplace, despite those who have more power than us, more salary, higher up the food chain. We don't need them to lead us in that way, but I can lead myself and my colleagues in that way. Yeah.
You talk about, you said yesterday when I chatted to you that you don't often like to use the word leadership.
Yeah.
And you had some different thoughts about that, and it kind of connects to what we're talking about. Do you want to just kind of talk a little bit about how you see that?
Yeah, I mean, this idea comes from a colleague of mine who once was talking about this idea that, you know, the concepts of leadership and followership still divide us, Rick.
Mm-hmm.
So you might say you're the leader and I'm the follower, because you need a follower to have a leader. I mean, that's the reality, whether we like the language or not. Yeah. A leader without followers is just some weird person who's gone for a walk in the park by themselves. That's all it is. It's actually a follower. But the suggestion here is, if we let go of leadership and followership and use the ideas of us-ship. It's not about you and me, the leader or the follower. It's about us-ship. Right. And us-ship dismantles perhaps some of those ingrained ideas of hierarchy around importance, responsibility, who should be leading what, who should be setting the tone. It's an equalizer in life. And what it does in the workplace, it says each and every one of us has a role to play. Each and every one of us is as important as the other. And it's not about one, the leader or the follower, having to act in a particular way, but rather us-ship calls for all of us to have a deeper connection.
Leadership is often still so much linked to title, pay grade, you know, the thing, instead of understanding that we are all essentially leaders and authors of our own life, and we turn up, and leadership is, you know, John Maxwell says simply, the leadership is influence. It is the ability to connect with those around us and join together in a pursuit of a common goal. So, you know, I know in our teams, we've been kind of thinking about shared leadership approaches and kind of those ideas, but I really like how you're framing it with an us ship that feels very much like we're the boat in the seas and we're getting to the new land together, and every single one of us has a critical role to play.
Yeah, I mean, I challenge you, to even let go of that idea of distributive leadership and just reimagine what it could be like. I mean, even the word teams is strange.
Right. My partner would love that. She hates people saying, "Hey, team." Like, what team?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of just language that we throw out, and I don't know what the alternative is, but one of the great things about early childhood education is we're quite creative humans who can make things up, really, because no one really pays attention to us, so we can just do whatever we want to some degree. Like, we can just make up.
Get creative and make your own meaning.
You can call your people what you want them. No one cares, really. Right. So maybe we can redefine what it means to coexist, what it means to share something in common. And I actually don't know, Rick, what the answer is, but I'm okay not knowing things in life because others often have a solution. I just know when things don't feel right.
Bringing that conversation up with your team, like, let's redefine what it means to coexist. That's such a rich and deep question that I know many teams would never have even come to that depth of conversation.
Yeah. And you know, I said at a conference recently, and it's the thing that people remembered, and it was just this line. I just said, you can't be everything to everybody. You're not vodka. And, I think we're all befriending vodka now more than ever. And I just went, and so you can't expect someone to be everything. You can't expect the leader to always have the solution. You have to feel okay to say, I don't know. I know there's an issue here, people, and I don't want to pretend that I know how to navigate this unknown land. I just want to say I'm speaking up because I've noticed there's an issue with, and I'm wondering if others feel the same, and can we collectively engage in what we think is the solution. But too often we praise those who know, we praise those who navigate turmoil so well. And this is the problem. We see these images, we hear these stories of leaders acting in that way. And our takeaway is, that's not me. That's not me. I find it, and I'm not here to defend people. It's not my job to defend people right now because it's a sweeping statement. We're so quick to pull a world leader down when they make a mistake.
Right.
Well, they're humans.
Mm-hmm.
They're humans. I mean, I'm very clear about my politics. I know what I believe in and what I don't believe in now. It might change in an hour. But I also watch leaders who stumble in life, who go to bed in turmoil. World leaders who go, I stuffed up. I made the wrong decision. And I'm not there to defend them, but I am there to say, not that I'm a world leader, but I've made decisions that have not been okay. And so let's just cut them some slack right now,
Totally. We tend to put, it's like innately, as a human, we look for someone to lead us, and generally that person is someone that we believe we could almost never become. There's like this inherent desire to have that person. And I think coming back to the idea of self-authoring and self-belief, super important in a team that's going to say, yeah, we're going to have an us-ship, is that people realize like they have the power and the grace to be able to steer the ship when they're called upon.
Yeah.
And that they don't need to look for the one that they can't become to lead them.
Yeah, I mean, you are who you are. Like, hello. I mean, sure, you can improve, but I truly believe that how I am right now, how I act right now is how I need to be. I may not know why that's the case, but it's how I need to be right now. And if I stay open, if I stay curious to the world, then that transformation may take place. But I'll be forgiving enough to myself, because again, if I can't forgive me, I can't forgive my neighbor or the people I work with. I'll be forgiven enough that when I transform into something else, because we're under construction, I won't put myself down for who I was last year, because that's where I had to be. That's where I don't know what's happening outside in my neighborhood. I don't know if you can hear that smashing.
Sounds like gunshots, just normal Australian days.
It's an interesting dilemma we have in life. Life is interesting, isn't it? Working with people is. Did you have that show Married at First Sight in New Zealand?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's wild in Australia. Like, there's a following. I'm not sure if it's quite like this here, but yeah, we do definitely have it.
I equate that to early childhood teams. Like you rock up to work and your leader says to you one day, here's your new teammate. And you're like, shit, it's like Married at First Sight. Are they weird? Are they strange? I'm going to have to live with them? What's going to happen? And you just kind of just go, what's going on? And someone chose them for you. That's the reality. Hey, someone chose them for you. And you just hope and pray it works out. But this is the thing. We don't need them to be like us. And often we think if they were like us, then it would be good. No, it won't. I used to work with this guy. I remember It's quite a funny story. He rocked up. I mean, he walked through the door, and I remember saying to someone, "Have we got a performer coming in for the children today?" Like, I just saw this. I'm like, this guy had 5 shades of brown. He was wearing like brown, and I'm like, he's not even wearing Prada. Like, it's not even Prada brown. And the director was like, "Oh, this is your new code teacher," and I'm like, what? He couldn't have been,
get on my knees and propose.
he couldn't have been any more opposite to me. Like, he was like, "G'day," and I'm like, who speaks like that? Like, what are you, Crocodile Dundee? Like, I'm like, where do people like that come from? Why is he in the city? Like, and what I realized is he was so different to me, and that was the best gift I've ever had. Because he was replacing someone on maternity leave. I have never cried so much when a colleague left, because he wasn't me. And what he offered the children was something I could never offer the children. And the way he behaved was so opposite. We were like both spectrums of masculinity, you know? And I just remember thinking, this has been the best gift for children, that you've just had someone so different to the other. And if you just had someone like me, there wouldn't have been music education, because I don't like doing music education. The environment would have been stunning, don't get me wrong. It would have been so clean, and relationships would have been good. But he brought this lovely difference to our place. Yeah. And I often remind people that in the workplace, when someone's not like you, be grateful. It's good. And, you know, the best test is, would you marry yourself? There's no way I would marry me. I would get out of here quick, smart. There can't be 2 of me in one building. And so when someone is different to me, I'm always grateful for that.
100%. It's the polarities between us that make us, right? It brings the energy and the fire.
Yeah.
And Anthony, it's been so wonderful. We have run out of time, so we're not going to go to questions today, but I know that a lot of the comments flooding in is just so insightful, and really loved a lot of the things that we've covered. We've covered a wide range, and it truly has been an honor. Thank you for taking the time on Good Friday to speak to us.
Stay safe, hey.
Yeah, absolutely.
I hope the Easter Bunny comes and visits.
Oh, yeah. In any creative way whatsoever. May it be wonderful.
All right, mate. You take care. Take care, everyone.
Okay.
See you later. Bye-bye.